Joining me now is South Australian Senator Alex Antic. Alex, you've caused a lefty meltdown in the past few days after you pipped shadow frontbencher Anne Ruston to the top of the Senate ticket in South Australia. The Guardian was a tad hysterical, but then again, when are they not? The ABC's Patricia Karvelas called you a hard right backbench senator who has knocked off SA's most senior female Liberal. How dare you win a Democratic vote? And then we had this from Labor Minister Catherine King.
We've seen in recent days those opposite knock off their most senior woman in South Australia for their Senate ticket in favour of a man who's a COVID conspiracist and thinks and frankly is also a Putin apologist. Right. No wonder they're backing Russia on fuel efficiency standards, frankly.
What is it about you that scares them so much? Is it that you're a straight white male oozing toxic masculinity, or the fact that you're actually a conservative with some real principles?
Hard right, far right. I saw a great meme Elon Musk tweeted today with a guy doing a song about, how people who traditionally were just, kind of traditional conservatives are now all far right and hard right, and it's so true. I don't really know. We saw a fairly predictable meltdown from the swamp media, and you expect that, but they've got someone to take aim at now, and so be it. I mean, the reality of the situation is this was a perfectly fair Democratic vote of the Liberal Party. I'm extremely honoured to lead the ticket, I have to say. It's a huge honour. I think from our side of politics, this is just another example of how we have to continue to shrug off this identity politics narrative. It's a grievance narrative. It really has no basis in fact. I mean, in South Australia alone, the last 4 legislative councils, so state upper house seats, have gone to women. That hasn't happened by design. It's happened because they were actually the best people for the job. And we go round and round in circles on this, merit-based argument. We just got to ignore it. The other thing is, Rita, I just don't care. So it's just, so they can say what they like. They say everything else. I get called hard right, far right, all those other names. Who cares? Whatever.
That is a good way to approach it, and not to play by their rules. And I think the Liberals are too often guilty of doing just that. But Minister Catherine King wasn't done with you yet. She also had this to say.
Actions like that actually matter. They matter for the decisions that are made around the cabinet table. They matter in terms of the decisions that are made around the party room. I am very proud to be part of a government that is promoting the economic and social interests of women. Those opposite have got a lot to learn.
Now, it's very interesting, all this talk about female representation and womanhood from a mob who cannot tell you what a woman is. And if you ask them to answer that question, they would be very confused indeed. But it's one thing for Labor and the Greens and their media mouthpieces to melt down over your pre-selection battle. But even some of your Liberal colleagues, Senator Jane Hume, for example, expressed their disappointment. Let's have a look.
Personally, I'm disappointed. Anne Ruston is a senior member of the Shadow Cabinet. She's an exceptionally good Shadow Minister, and quite frankly, I think that this was a mistake. But it's a mistake that is a decision of the South Australian Liberal Division. It's not a decision that I can make.
But I note, Alex, she's not so upset about a man beating 2 female opponents to win pre-selection. She posted this yesterday, congratulating Tim Wilson, who was pre-selected for the Melbourne Bayside seat of Goldstein, and beat 2 women to do that. What's your response to this selective feminism from your own side?
Well, I think, Rita, look, these are matters for people to run a commentary on if they want. If people are disappointed, I'm very happy for them to be disappointed. That's a matter for Jane, and it's not a matter for anyone other than the 200-odd members of the State Council in South Australia to be disappointed or otherwise. And that's the end of the story. Once again, it just really not something I've turned my mind to.
All right, well, let's move on to Labor staring down the barrel of a minority government at best at the next election. If this polling holds up, the primary vote is now lower than it was at the last election. The latest news poll published today shows Labor at 32%, Coalition at 37% with the primary vote. seems there's no lasting impact, no positive there for Labor with their stage 3 tax cut backflip. But what's also interesting in these numbers is the Greens polling. They're at 13%, Alex, and really they've shown us in recent months just how loony and extreme they are on everything from Israel to energy to race relations, and yet their support base seems to be increasing.
Yeah, it's intriguing, actually. And we saw a lot of that in South Australia on the weekend with a local by-election in the former Premier's old seat of Dunstan, where at the moment it's not completely counted, but they're halfway through the ballots, and the Greens are tracking at about 22%, if you can believe that. And there was a similar thing happening in Queensland. Look, I think the lesson here is Aussies are working this government out. They're not stupid, and everything's more expensive than it was 2 years ago. Food 7%, fuel 20% more expensive. All of these things, the Voice and a whole raft of other things. So we know that. We know that they're going to work out this Labor government by the time we get to the next election. But what we have to be careful of are the incursions from the fringes. So the other sides of politics. And I talked about this a lot last week during my pre-selection. I said, listen, in South Australia, there are polls which suggest One Nation's vote is as high as 11, 12, 13% in South Australia. And the same applies to the Greens. So once again, we've been through this path a million times. The message for my side of politics is the Liberal Party needs to be liberal and it needs to prosecute those values, and we win. We did so in 2019 with the Morrison miracle election. It really wasn't a miracle as such. It was just a Liberal government and campaign that focused on winning the hearts and minds of the quiet Australians. That's all we have to worry about. You can worry about all the teal spill all you want. Every time Liberal oppositions are attached to their values, they win.
Well, yeah, 2019, we were told that was the climate change election. And we saw where that went, where the Liberals had a very different policy to Labor. At the last election, both pushing net zero, really. The Conservatives didn't have much to back there. And on that, Labor are pushing ahead with their nature positive plan. It's got a beautiful sounding name, but this is the power to significantly curb all sorts of projects, mining, housing, just about any major development, including a new hospital, all in the name of environmental preservation. But Alex, many argue this is not what this legislation is really about, preserving nature. This might be a sweet-sounding name. What is this legislation about, and why should we be concerned about it?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and we haven't seen an exposure draft yet. The best you can do at this stage is getting on the website and seeing a nice glossy brochure with koalas and trees and gum trees, and the name, Nature Positive. The left are so good at their marketing and their PR. We see this time after time. Love is love. All the slogans are great, and of course the outcomes are not. So look, we will wait to see, but it appears to be a fairly significant overhaul of the EPBC Act, the Environment Protection Biodiversity Conservation Act, in record time. This is what governments are doing now. Labor governments all across the country do this all the time, introduce large swathes of legislative instruments with a lot of regulatory control as well. I have to say, a lot of this gets done administratively in a lot of these bills. But what it actually looks like, we don't know yet, because it hasn't been consulted. Industry are saying that. None of the mining companies have been told much about it. They're all complaining about this, and it seems to be building in the background. But let's be clear, what this looks like from the outside is yet another dalliance into the world of globalism by this Australia Last government. And, we need to be on top of this. We need to be ready to call it out for what it is. By the way, the Howard government in 1999 took 10 years to consult and talk about the original incarnation of the EPBC Act. This seems to be getting pushed through in a matter of months in the winter period. So we will wait to see, but it smells like trouble to me.
Now, just before you go, I want to bring to your attention what's happening in the UK. The BBC is being accused of scaremongering during COVID, reporting rare COVID deaths among healthy adults as the norm during the pandemic, and misrepresenting the true risk of coronavirus to help boost lockdown support. Now, this was revealed at a UK COVID inquiry. If we ever had a proper inquiry here, a Royal Commission, I'm sure pretty much every media outlet in the country would be accused of this too, and with good reason. How are we going with that reckoning? Because it seems like a lot of people made some very reckless statements, pushed policies that were really harmful on a number of levels, and there has been really next to no accountability.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, a group of us have been pushing for a Royal Commission for some considerable time, a proper one, by the way. I mean, the Albanese government set up an inquiry which, is just clearly not going to do the job it needs to do. It just can't. So we want to see a Royal Commission. We want to see that done. I mean, the irony of this being, what's come of this has been this push for misinformation and disinformation laws, and yet most of the mainstream media were responsible for most of the misinformation and disinformation, as it turned out, and no one questioned the narrative. So here we are, and this is why this was a very significant period in Australian history. A lot of people were hurt, a lot of people were harmed for a whole range of reasons, and I will continue to say it as long as I'm here. We need a Royal Commission. It needs to be a proper, excuse the expression, root and branch. Look, I hate it, but I had to use it because I couldn't think of anything else. And look into where we're up to. And, for the good of the nation, that needs to happen. And it's got to be a serious fair income one, not just a frolic in the COVID wilderness.
Senator Alex Antic, thank you so much for your time this evening.